Welcome in everyone, this is Sean with MTG808 Jr. and today we're going to be taking a look at a pretty unique Golgari Undergrowth deck. I think it has some potential. I'd love to know what you think, but before we jump into that, just want to make sure everyone knows about our upcoming events. We have 5 events in a row here to kind of close out the first semester, to close out the 2018. So November 4th, Sunday, we have Youth Standard Pauper over at The Planet. November 11th, Youth Standard Pauper over at Westside Comics. November 17th, Youth Standard Pauper over at Minikyu Mililani. And November 24th, Youth Standard Pauper again back at The Planet. And all of that is leading up to December 1st, Youth Championship Scholarship Tournament over at Dirtle Zone in IAEA. So, if you want to win that Youth Championship Scholarship Tournament, first place gets $500 in scholarship, second place gets $250 in scholarship. Well, you are in the right place to brush up on your Standard Pauper skills, hone your, refine that deck list, and of course, showing up to these tournaments leading up to the scholarship tournament is the best way to practice, get comfortable with your deck, get those last couple tweaks into your strategy, and then of course, see how you measure up against the field. So, would love to see all of everybody come check out these tournaments. Would love to see you there. All right, Golgari Undergrowth. This deck is playing a whopping 34 creatures, and it's a pretty unique one. So if you want to take a look at this text version of the list, there will be a link in the description. But for now, we are going to switch over here to Magic Online. All right. So, as I said, a whopping 34 creatures in the deck. Basically, trying to take full advantage of the Undergrowth mechanic. Full 4 copies of Rhizome Lurcher, 4 mana, 2/2, enters the battlefield with a +1/+1 counter on it for each creature in your graveyard. And then, of course, Moodmark Painter, 4 mana, 2/3. When it enters the battlefield, target creature gets Menace and +X/+0 until end of turn, where X is the number of creature cards in your graveyard. There are other Undergrowth cards, notably the Worm. Where are you? Vigor Spore Worm. I tried fitting this guy into the deck, but just couldn't find room. If you want to pick up the deck and try to find room for this guy, I think he's very powerful. It's totally reasonable to try to get him in there. I just couldn't, and the very little playtesting that I got done with this list, showed me that just having 8 Undergrowth payoffs was pretty reasonable. But that's kind of the centerpiece of the deck. The rest of the deck is just to, play a bunch of value creatures, try to trade with your opponents, and then hopefully fill up the graveyard. So Hired Poisoner, 1 mana, 1/1 Death Touch. People are very eager to try to trade with this as soon as possible. Trying to trade the smallest possible creature for it. So people are always eager to trade with that, similar with Skittering Heartstopper. Llanowar Elves, of course, gives us a mana source that's also a creature. Dusk Legion Zealot, 2 mana, 1/1. When it enters the battlefield, you draw a card and you lose a life, but it also happens to be a creature, so it helps us kind of play the grindy game. Burglar Rat does the same, just in the opposite direction. Instead of drawing us a card, it forces our opponents to discard a card, and of course it is a creature, so it counts towards Undergrowth. Tishana's Wayfinder, 3 mana, 2/2. When it enters the battlefield, it explores, so if there's a land on top, you put it into your hand. If there is not a land on top, then you can you can keep it on top or put it in the graveyard, and this becomes a 3/3. It gets a +1/+1 counter, and it becomes a 3/3. So in terms of trying to stock up the graveyard, this guy does a pretty decent job, or it just draws us land, right? We are playing 4 drops and 4 5-drops, so the deck is a little bit mana hungry. So Tishana's Wayfinder fits real nicely in there. Of course, we have our Undergrowth payoff cards. Usually you don't really want to play them on 4. Hopefully you have other cards, that you're able to play on 4. But, if you do have to play these guys on 4, it's reasonable to expect Rhizome Lurcher to be a 4 mana 4/4 by turn 4, or Moodmark Painter to, give +1 or 2 to a creature and just kind of get in the damage. So you can play these guys on 4, but it's ideal to kind of wait until, like, your opponent attacks you and you're able to get some good trades in, and then you slam these down and they're just huge. Windgrace Acolyte is our 5-drop of choice. Unfortunately, besides the Surveil mechanic and the Explore mechanic, this is the only way to self-mill yourself in the format. So 5 mana, 3/2 flying, Cat Warrior. When Windgrace Acolyte enters the battlefield, put the top 3 cards of your library into your graveyard, and you gain 3 life. So, try to help stock up the graveyard full of creatures. We have 34 creatures in the deck, so odds are that you'll probably mill one, or 2 or 3. And then, it's just a 5 mana 3/2. We do need to attack and try to kill our opponents, so it's a pretty decent attacker. And those are the creatures in the deck. As I said, 34. Really trying to keep those numbers for Undergrowth really high. The only non-creature, non-land spells in the deck are really meant to try to help us abuse our 4-drops. So Cobbled Wings gives a creature flying, right? If we target a flying creature with Moodmark Painter, it's much more likely to just kind of go to the face and connect with our opponent. And then Talons of Wildwood, 2 mana, enchanted creature, gets +1/+1 and has trample. And then, of course, you can pay 3 and return Talons of Wildwood from your graveyard to your hand. So if you happen to mill it with Windgrace Acolyte, you can return it. I'm not sure which one of these is better. You might just want the full 4 copies of Talons. I don't think you want to play more than 2 copies of Cobbled Wings. Let me know if you think the deck should definitely have 4 copies of Talons or not. But giving your Rhizome Lurcher trample, or giving a big power bonus to a creature with trample really helps to end games when it comes to our Undergrowth creatures. The whole deck is kind of revolving around those, so we want to just make sure that when we play them, we're getting the most bang for our buck. So these are the 2 non-creature spells that kind of help us do that. Our sideboard is chock full of creatures. Besides Duress kind of helps us to get those pesky Essence Scatters and Murders out of our opponent's hand. But Deadeye Tormentor is also pretty good at that. 3 mana 2/2. Human Pirate with Raid. When Deadeye Tormentor enters the battlefield, if you attacked with a creature this turn, target opponent discards a card. So it kind of helps back up Burglar Rat to kind of pressure the cards in the opponent's hand. Try to get them to spend their removal early so that they don't have to discard it to our discard creatures, and then kind of hopefully pave the way for a big Rhizome Lurcher. Gravedigger is great. I kind of wish we had room for it in the main deck, but unfortunately, our 4-drop slot is kind of chock full right now. I was contemplating building the deck with 4 Gravediggers in the main deck, and then cutting the Moodmark Painter and playing the Worm as our other Undergrowth payoff. I think that's reasonable, but I think that if we're going to be playing a 6-drop, we might need to play more lands, and then we would have to kind of reconfigure the bottom of the curve a little bit as well. So, if you think that's the better way to build a deck, try it out and let me know. Would love to hear some feedback on that. But Gravedigger is really good against the control decks. It's not as punishing to have a really clunky curve, so you can just side in extra 4-drops. And just plan to play the really long game. And then our best sideboard card against the aggro decks is Crawl Foragers. If we're able to kind of like muck up the board, not die super quickly, make our trades against the aggro decks, this it could gain 5 to 10 life when it comes into play, which is really good. So I think this guy is very solid. Backs up Windgrace Acolyte nicely as just a solid creature that comes into play and gains us life to help us stabilize against the aggro decks. I drafted this deck up during club. Some of the kids were able to test it out. Shout out to Luke and Ethan for testing it out. And it seemed to have some game. I was skeptical because it's just straight 34 creatures. We might want to shave on the land. So a couple alternative builds that I was considering. Adventurous Impulse would be a decent non-land spell to have in the deck. It would allow us to kind of shave down on the lands, but I was skeptical of including it in the deck because it is we want to play it on turn 1, right? However, the vast majority of the spells in the deck are black, so we would have to kind of like skew our mana even more towards green, despite the rest of our curve being black. But this would allow us to kind of trim on lands. I don't think we would trim 4 lands for this. That would be a little, pushing it a little bit. But this would allow us to trim on lands, so it is a consideration. It would help us hit our Undergrowth payoff cards more likely, or more often rather. And then the other card that I was considering, Ixali's Diviner, 2 mana, 0/3. When it enters the battlefield, it explores. So similar to Tishana's Wayfinder, it can put a card into the graveyard. The fact that it's a 0/3 and it can't pressure our opponents unless it hits the right card off of Explore makes me skeptical of having this, but I think this is a reasonable card to have in the sideboard if you want to just have more slots against the aggro decks. This guy would be solid, and it fits right in with the game plan. But if you did main deck this, it would be reasonable to trim on the land count as well. So if you want to up the creature count, this guy is a reasonable way to do it. So as I'm sure I have made clear by now, I'm not sure if this is the optimal build of this archetype, but just the general thrust of the deck, just playing a ton of creatures and then trying to maximize the powerful Undergrowth payoff cards. It seems like a legitimate, viable strategy. So, give it a spin. Let me know what you think, and would love to hear your thoughts. Thanks for stopping by. That's all we've got for today. But if you want to support what we do, if you want to support the content that we make, or just support Youth Magic here on Oahu, please consider becoming a Patreon subscriber. All of our tournaments are made possible through the generous donations from our Patreon subscribers. Our small scale regular tournaments, as well as our hopefully twice yearly scholarship tournaments. So if you want to help us make that a possibility, help us grow that project, please consider becoming a Patreon subscriber. Or if you just want to support the content that we make here, of course, Patreon is the way to support us doing that. Of course, just watching the videos, hitting that like button, hitting that subscribe button, leaving a comment, those are all great ways to support what we do as well. So thank you for stopping by. Let us know what you think about the deck, and I will catch you next time. Peace.